The Fantasy Fullback Dive is beyond thrilled to welcome on one of the biggest, baddest, most recognizable Wolves in the game. Establish the runs, Evan Silva at Evan Silva on Twitter. Evan has been crushing content for the Establish the Run draft guide, including his team previews, his sneaky stacks, his tiers of Evan. Love that name, by the way, the top 150. And he's also co-hosting the ETR podcast with another fantasy beast, Mr. Adam Levitin. Evan, thank you so much for coming on, man. How's it going tonight?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Earlier did a podcast. First time I've really ever spoken to Bill Barnwell, who has always been someone that I kind of looked up to, really. Or at least I thought was smart. We had him on the Establish the Run podcast, and that was a thrill. We actually were scheduled to podcast with him on Wednesday, but I went to the haircuttery for my first haircut in legit 6 months, something crazy. And it was their first day opening, the haircuttery's first day opening since literally March. And they didn't want too many people inside. So they were people waiting outside. I was waiting outside. I was sweating and I wound up waiting for 35 minutes, which is a long time to wait to get your haircut. And I was DMing with Barnwell and talking with Adam Levitin on Slack. And I was like, yo, man, I'm going to be late for this podcast. And we were trying to figure out what to do, and we just decided to delay it. But I had to prioritize this haircut because it was getting real bad in the back. A horrible mullet. And once I got in there, the haircuttery, the hairstylist, she told me that she had cut three heads of hair since March 15th, and that's what she does for a living. And she was I was how did you kind of deal with that, And she was I drank a lot, during the day, and I was
right.
Shit, I did that too. And, but mine was a lot out of boredom, and her was a lot out of anxiety.
Yeah.
It was legit worried about her situation. She has a little 4-year-old girl that she takes care of and doesn't necessarily have a lot of friends in the neighborhood, and, just kind of stayed inside all the time. And, I have a little daughter of my own, and, she gave me a great haircut, and I gave her $100 tip, and she thought it was I knew she was looking at the screen. She goes, and it made me feel good, but I knew, I wanted to help her out, at
Absolutely.
that point, and so, but that's, just my little story from the pandemic. And it's good to be here to talk about, happy times. Hopefully the NFL will play a season.
Oh, thank God. We need it, man. It's been absolutely wild. And I got my hair cut last week. It's do you feel like a new man at this point?
Yes.
I needed it.
Oh yeah. And I've been moving, and it's freaking 90 degrees out. Oh. And I cannot have this hair all over me, making it, making just everything miserable. So it really has been, it was a changing experience almost.
Absolutely. It really is. Yeah. My girlfriend was I cannot look at you another day. You have to go get your haircut or else. So thank God I did. It's been a life changer, to say the least, on this end too. So, and same idea as you too. As soon as I got in, you got to tip your barber. So good stuff, man.
Yeah. I was yo, I would have spent all that money on haircuts
exactly
anyways during that time. So why not just give it all to her? She probably needs it, It sounded like she needs it. And so, and it probably, help make her day. And honestly, it kind of helped make my day, because I just felt like I did something, nice for another person.
100%, man. Yeah. Great stuff as always. It's great to hear. And that's, what we all got to do. So everyone listening, make sure you're tipping your barbers, you're tipping if you're finally able to get out and get to the food service industry that, everybody needs that stuff right now. So yeah, good to hear, and great tips just in life. And of course, we're here for the fantasy tips, but I mean, that's all the good stuff right there. And on the show today, speaking of fantasy tips, we're going to kind of give you a little sampling platter of Evan's pieces in the draft guide. Of course, we're not going to give you everything because, my God, you got to just go get it. It's $30. You get a $25 coupon. So you're essentially getting the best insight in the game for $5. It's unbelievable. I've already gotten my copy. I've been digging through the last week, and I keep losing my schedule because I'm finding myself reading the team previews. It's 3 hours later. I'm late for dinner. Like, it's a fantastic guide. So we're going to dive into, a question or two about every single piece. And then what I love to do, and the reason I bought it last year, the reason I bought it this year, I love doing is cross-checking my top 150 with Evans. There's very few guys I'll do that with. And I don't mean that as an asshole. Like, I respect my own rankings enough that I don't really like to change them much. But man, I love to see other bold rankers too and see, holy shit.
I do too. Yeah.
It's so helpful to see that. And so there's definitely some guys we see eye to eye on a lot of them, but it's more helpful for us to kind of dissect, or at least for me to see, okay, man, like, and I don't want to give any away, but let's say JuJu is so high on Evan's big board and he's so far down on mine. Do I need to reevaluate? So there's only a handful of guys I like to do that with. Evan is certainly one of them. So to actually be able to speak about it and not just look at his big board and reconsider is an absolute thrill. So again, thank you so much for coming on. That's kind of the segment we have planned. But first, as we kind of always do, if there's ever a brain to dissect, a fantasy brain, it is the King Silvas himself. So I'd love to just ask you a few general questions before we get into the draft guide stuff, starting with what's kind of been your path into this industry? How did you get involved, and what advice do you have for others looking to kind of break into this pretty crowded space at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story, but and you can listen to it. I mean, if you really want to listen to it, the RotoViz did a podcast about the history of RotoWorld like 4 years ago. And you can hear about the history of Matthew Berry, the history of Greg Rosenthal, the history about me, Adam, Chris Wessling, RotoPat. I mean, the Mike Clay is on there, Jeff Ratcliffe. So it's, a lot of, if you really want detail on that. But I would just say I just busted my ass. Like I would wake up in the morning. I'd maybe, prep myself some coffee, eat some eggs and sausage, and then I would work until I went to sleep every day for like 10 years, and that's what I got better. And I mean, I'm still not where I want to be from, a prognostication standpoint, but I got better as a writer. I got better as a podcaster. I got better I got better by just busting my ass. I mean, that's the only way to get better. I like to use this analogy sort of for the people that say, oh, it's so great to rest your quarterback in the first year you just drafted this quarterback. No, the way that you get better is by playing, by taking your lumps, by doing things that are stupid, by saying things that are stupid, and then learning from them, and I think that is the best way to improve. And that's one thing I try to teach like my daughter. I'm like, what's the way to get better? Practice. And I think that's the best way to just improve in almost any aspect of life. It's not you can watch other people do, and you can definitely take pointers from that, but you doing yourself and you making mistakes or you do something great. And you figure out why did I do that thing great? Did I just get lucky, or was it my process? Or that would be my best advice.
100%. Yeah, and that's fantastic advice to everyone out there. I'm certainly not in year 10 by any means, but at year 4 or 5, it is that once you finally get lumped, like I remember it was, I think, week 3 of my first year, we had finally gotten like a decent following, still, not huge by any means, but it was my first time really just getting a bunch wrong. And it was like, oh, fuck, like I suck. I apologized on air. I felt horrible. And then everybody like that first week was like, man, you've crushed it for me. You've been so helpful. Like, just to hear that again, it was so validating, and it gives you such a nice boost. But you need it. You need to get it out of the system, get used to failing a little bit, and figure out why you failed too. So I love that advice. It goes out for anybody out there that's starting. Just keep going after it. I love that, Evan. So thank you for sharing that insight. In terms of your process, in terms of after 10 years of doing this, I don't know if it's evolved, if you've kind of had the same process since day one, but when you approach a new season, do you kind of have any routines, best practices that you follow when you begin and develop your evaluations and rankings?
That's a good question. I think that I've had more free reign since I went from RotoWorld to establish the run. Like, I'm just a content creator. I don't have to be in charge of 15 people anymore, and worrying about, what other people do, and, worrying if the blurbs are spell checked and all that. And so I have had more free reign by far at Establish the Run. I'm just like a content creator. There are way smarter business guys in our company, and they handle the business side, and they're like, you just create content, and so that's made it easy on me. And I think that it has allowed me to be a little bit more like liberal. I don't know if that's the right term, with the way that I like do rankings. And I think that we've taken the approach that we're not really doing like statistically projected rankings. Our rankings are stances versus ADP.
Yeah.
And because we anticipate that so many of our readers are going to be volume drafters. And when I say volume drafter, I mean someone that's not doing 2 or 3 leagues, like someone that is probably playing best ball, that is probably playing DFS, that might, is probably playing like, I don't know, a couple teams at least on FFPC where you're playing, higher stakes leagues. And I mean, you're drafting a lot of teams, and you need to take stances on certain players, and that's going to be what determines at the end of the day, how you finish at the end of the season. And so I think that is the most transparent and satisfying way to make rankings, is to just take stances against ADP. And in some instances, like I'm below ADP on Devin Singletary, okay? But in a recent draft, I was drafting with Noah Rudell, who was a pretty smart dude. We drafted a couple years in a row now. He's a pretty big, like higher stakes presence on Twitter. And, we're at the end of the 5th round, and we're looking at, and there are still like 3 good receivers left in our, let's say, 5th receiver tier. And there's only 1 running back left in our 5th running back tier, and it's Evan Singletary. And the receivers are McLaurin, Hilton, and Shark. And we love these receivers, okay? But technically, we should take the running back that is the last of his kind in that tier, but we didn't, because we have a much stronger stance really on all of these receivers. We're above ADP on all of these 3 receivers. McLaurin goes 1 pick ahead of us. We're like, shit. And then then we're down to Shark and Hilton, and we were somewhat tempted to go with Shark, but we went with Hilton. We think he's going to be healthy. He plays indoors, where he's just, a phenom indoors. We think his quarterback situation is going to be significantly upgraded. We take him. He's in his contract year. We take him. We come back. We get Singletary in the early 6th. We didn't really want Singletary, but, so long as we had him as high as we did in our tiers and on my top 150, like if he was coming back, there was no way we were going to pass on him. And that is just kind of like a testament, I think, to our process. It's not going to work out every time. I mean, you get sniped, that happens. Like I kind of want a McLaurin there over Hilton and Sharp.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think that has been maybe a way that I've evolved. And I think it helps with aggressiveness, and I think it helps with posterity, and you end up like getting the guys that you want, I mean, big time. But you also end up getting guys that you don't necessarily want if they fall way out of place in ADP. Like, you're going to catch them.
Absolutely. And when I totally agree with all of that. And we're going to talk about the tiers of Evan in a little bit and how they're so important. You just gave us a prime example of when you're evaluating, oh, holy shit, this last tier is about to fall off. Even if I don't love this guy, he's in this tier and it makes me realize how good he actually could be. So I have to take that jump. So we'll be diving into that for
It
sure.
would have been awful. I'll tell you what the worst outcome would have been is if it would have taken Singletary in the late fifth. And then it comes, and as we look at the ninth pick, all right, McLaurin goes, we take Singletary, Hilton and Sharp go, and then we got to draft some dude we really don't want. We avoided that landmine.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. You got to get the guy you love first, and then you see, totally agree with all that. So when you're forming these stances for your rankings, which I love, like you figure out the guys that you love, what are some of the factors you're weighing in? I mean, obviously there's so many different ones: usage, individual talent, the team and the scheme and all that great stuff. So if you were like making a formula, I guess is the way to put it, what are the way you kind of weigh these different factors to form these stances?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer because it's so much on a case-by-case basis, number one. And number two, the team previews really get me to dig into guys that, maybe I hadn't considered as much before, or I overrated previously. They just, doing the team previews just like, because you start with, like, at the top, it shows you, the play caller history. Okay. And then, it goes to like the projected starting lineup. And then really what I would say the foundation is usage projections because we talk about every single skill position player on every team that is relevant. And so the foundation is probably the usage projection, but we're definitely going to mix in some talent takes into the the little blurbs on each skill position player. Job security, especially when you're playing best ball. If you can find a quarterback who you think maybe he's not going to give you 30-point weeks, right? But if he has job security and he's likely to play all 16 games, and maybe he has a couple other positive factors working in his favor, like maybe he has a nice schedule, or maybe his team made a nice pass catcher acquisition, or hey, maybe he looks like he's going to get a lot of volume or maybe he's good at running. He has a couple of nice factors working in his favor. And it looks like he's going to be really, really cheap. I mean, Gardner Minshew, Teddy Bridgewater, those kind of guys are definitely in that bucket. Maybe Joe Burrow this year, maybe Cam Newton actually this year. And as you do more in-depth research into the players, I always end up making a significant number of changes to my rankings.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into that too, because I love those team previews. If you were going to do nothing else to prepare for your season, if you've missed the entire offseason, just reading those team previews, I think I'm through like 8 out of the 10 that have, or however many have been released. I've been just churning them through. They're all fantastic. As you're saying, it's just so in depth to get a preview of the surroundings for the player, but then also the talent and what you see as the usage. So if you're looking for that formula, those team previews are absolutely crushing it. So, well, I'm going to ask you a question about those later, which one was the most impactful. So just be ready for that one. But in terms of this, as you're studying to build those stances as well, there's often this debate, analytics versus film. And I kind of get the same answer. It's usually often a blend, but do you kind of find yourself leaning one way versus the other as you're studying players, analytics versus film?
I mean, I do enough watching during the season that I don't really feel the need to go back and watch a guy anymore, because I know that if I do go back and watch a guy, and I have done this in the past, and it actually has fucking burned me more often than not. I'm only going to go back and watch a small sample size. I mean, I'm not going to go watch 16 games, and actually 16 games is even a small sample size. One season, we see guys have be 1 year wonders all the time. So I do not go back and watch players. I watch every game during the regular season, and I watch guys coming out of college, and I know their skill sets, and I know where they win and where they need improvement coming out of college, and then I see them in the pros, and I don't need to go back and watch them during the off season again. I think it's actually much more likely to be misleading. So I use I rely on my memory from watching players and watching just knowing where they win. I mean, just knowing their strengths and their weaknesses for the most part, and then trying to project their usage again, opportunity, and things like quarterback to pass catcher, established continuity and connections. I think that is just incredibly valuable and maybe even undervalued because it doesn't feel like we can quantify it, but we really can. I mean, there are certain quarterback and pass catcher combinations that are just unbreakable. Like Aaron Rodgers will throw to DeVante Adams in double coverage. The on-field chemistry that Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett have is just unbelievable. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and then you see situations like last year where Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham looks like an ideal pairing on paper, but they had no chemistry. And that's especially, I think, going to be accentuated in a year like this where there is no off season. And how many preseason games are we going to get? There's like a legit chance we might get 0 preseason games. Who knows how training camp is going to be? So that's big for me.
Absolutely. And in terms of whether it's a specific stat like passer rating when targeting a guy or different things, are there any analytics that you prioritize to kind of illuminate some of these trends you're looking to see, or any stats just in general that you're like, I always look at this every year while preparing my rankings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. At quarterback, touchdown rate, regression to the mean is like, I wouldn't say foolproof, but probably the best metric to look at. That really helped us last year in projecting that Deshaun Watson would outscore Patrick Mahomes. And look, I realized Mahomes got hurt a little bit, and Tyreek was out for like a month, and that contributed to it. But we knew that Mahomes was going to take a significant step back in touchdown passing rate, and he did. I mean, he went from like 8.6 to 5.4, and he was still – that 5.4 is a great TD rate, by the way. But, yeah, we liked Deshaun Watson. We caught a lot of heat for that. I mean, apparently you were an idiot if you didn't have Patrick Mahomes as the overall quarterback one entering last year. But, we hit that. So – at the quarterback position, definitely touchdown rate. At the running back position, receiving usage is absolutely critical. And I think that even for people that still play in non-PPR leagues, I think that this – I mean, are there any of those left? But actually,
hopefully not.
Hopefully not, right. But even in non-PPR leagues, that stuff matters more than people anticipate, because a target is worth so much more than a carry. Like 19 carries for 71 yards is not helping you in fantasy, but 5 catches for 31 yards is worth what, 8.1 points in a PPR league, and in a PPR league, 19 freaking carries for 71 is worth 7.1. You know what I mean? So I think, and this is where we're going to differ. I know that you love Raheem Mostert. Let's save it. Okay.
We'll save it. Yeah.
At the wide receiver position, yards per route run, and you could just read the Establish the Run draft kit because I talk about that so much. And I would say the same for tight ends, not to the same extent, but also just how much are you getting on the field, and what are your touchdown opportunities going to look like? And that's tough to predict. But, a guy like Eric Ebron, I think, is pretty interesting this year, because in that Steelers offense, no one wants Eric Ebron. I mean, he's like tight end 22 in ADP, and he could easily score 8 or 9 touchdowns.
Easily.
If we get, 80% of Big Ben. So touchdown opportunities are very, very big, especially for trying to parse out the tight ends that are, there's a sort of like an elite tier, and then it falls off a cliff, and you're just kind of searching for guys after that. And the guys that are going to be in position to score a lot of touchdowns, those are the guys that you want at tight end.
It's so funny to listen to these interviews because I ask the same questions, and there's definitely some trends starting to emerge. Like Scott Barrett comes on, talks about weighted opportunities and running backs and the importance of receptions for the position. And then Pat Fitzmaurice comes on, yards per route run, and how important the efficiency metrics are, especially if somebody might be projected for a bigger role the next year. Justin Boone, the number one ranker of last year, comes on and says touchdowns for tight ends is crucial, and says Eric Ebron is his biggest sleeper because of the fact. So it's just, you start to see these
Big
trends.
fan of Justin Boone. Big fan.
He's the man. It was an awesome interview to be able to pick his brain too. So it is funny, Joe, just to see all these interesting trends that emerge from wolf to wolf, because and that's what our listeners have to pay attention to. If you're listening to all these interviews and you keep hearing these same trends, you better be writing these down, because that's what the best of the best are using. I certainly am writing all these notes down as we go. It's so cool to hear those different trends. What about in terms of, we only got a couple more where we're just kind of picking your brain, and then we'll dive into some of the player-centric stuff that I know a lot of our listeners like, but still, I find this exercise so valuable in terms of tools, whether it's from ETR as well as other, and I will say a lot of the Wolves that have come on have shouted out so many different ETR articles and trends, and both in season and draft guides. You guys have been one of the most shouted out in both an analyst and tools of those two questions. But whether it's ETR or any others in the industry, are there any kind of tools you regularly utilize to help you get ready for a season?
I don't think so. I think that, I really just rely on just my always, or, what I'm always trying to keep to be like my developing knowledge of the game. Mm-hmm. How I anticipate each team performing and how that might affect the players within those teams. But as for an actual tool, no, I don't really rely on an actual tool. I just try to. I don't really involve any tools in my process. What tools do you involve in your process? Maybe if you give me an example of a tool that you use, like maybe I could come up with one.
I got you there. And necessarily not so much a tool as to illustrate like your point of studying whole teams. I love Thorman's pace stuff. Like you can't find that anywhere else. Like that's fantastic stuff. I really like the guys at RotoViz. The way they visualize data, and there's so many studies and just in life about how when you can see something, you process it so much faster than reading through. I feel like they've crushed how you can just see all the data, their graphs and their stat explorers, game splits. Those are a few I love personally. To just illustrate what I think I was thinking, or helping me realize.
That brings to mind some thoughts. I don't think projecting the season, I don't think I use any major tools, but during the season, absolutely, like Josh Hermsmeyer's air yards, buy low air yards article, certainly, and also Sports Info Solutions last year would send us like reports that would illustrate quarterbacks and wide receivers that were particularly good or bad versus man or zone coverage. And then that was particularly relevant whenever, say, that quarterback and that wide receiver duo was facing like the Lions, who ran man coverage at a very, very high rate, or like the Panthers, who ran zone coverage at a very, very high rate. And that's not really something that people talk about a ton yet. And I don't think that it's, hardcore predictive or anything. Again, I don't think there is any, what do they call it? The Holy Grail statistic. I don't think that there is any Holy Grail statistic, but I do think that a lot of these statistics and metrics are useful at the extremes. Like if a running back has a particularly easy schedule, especially early in the season, or if he has a particularly difficult schedule, I don't care about, he has the 17th, ranked schedule. Like I don't care about that. But I do care if he has like the 32nd or the 31st or the 29th, or the 1st, 2nd, or the 5th easiest. I do care about that. And I do care about like Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper smash man coverage. So when Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper are going up against a defense that plays man coverage like one of the highest rates in the league, then I'm definitely going to care about that. And, and vice versa. So, yeah, Sports Info Solutions is an up-and-coming source for data.
A few people have actually shouted out your matchups column and the in-season package that you guys have and that coverage stuff that you really dive into that very few, if anybody else in the industry does. I long read it at RotoWorld. I long read it now last year. It's so useful to know that stuff because nobody else really talks about it. And especially when it's like, all right, now this corner is injured and this third string guy is going to be coming on and he's on this receiver who's going to toast him, and all that stuff is so useful. So
I'll tell you what, people man, when we did utilize when those SIS reports like came to us, I mean, they popped. Like we were all in, on certain situations and really, really hit big.
Yeah.
When SIS was sending us those reports that indicated that the man zone differentiations were at the extremes. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a wave of the future.
Absolutely. And the last question of picking your brain, and you've already given us a few names here, but are there any other analysts that our listeners, if they're following you, they've probably heard of some big names too, but are there any guys that they might not know or they know and that you just respect, you cross your stuff with their work? Any other Wolves that you want to shout out before we get into our featured segment here?
I usually try to avoid this stuff because I always end up leaving someone out that is very much deserving, but fuck it. Rich Rebar is like the best analyst in the fantasy football game. And I read and he's like one of my best friends too. So but I don't even think I'm biased. Like I think that he is legit the best fantasy football analyst in the game. Pat Thorman, certainly Adam. I love the hire of Pat Kerrane for Dynasty that we made. Reading his stuff, like, and I've like hung out with him in real life, like partied with him on Tybee Island with Chris Wessling. Him and his brother, Pat has a brother named Mike. And they were both there. We went and hung out with Chris Wessling on Tybee Island, which is just a wild, wild place. And he's been an amazing hire. I mean, I really could go on and on, but those would be several guys, that would stick out to me. I mean, JJ Zacharyson, the guys that the thing is that our industry is very, very, very merit-based. Like, guys that aren't good or that don't work hard, they do not rise. They plateau and they fall off. And the people that are good and do work hard, they rise. I mean, it's very, very much a merit-based industry. It's not yet to the point where, and I feel like every industry ultimately gets sucked in by like cronyism and, just what matters is who you know as opposed to what that old saying. And I feel like but we're very far from that. And I think that's one thing that's kind of refreshing about our industry.
100%. And similar to the stats, you're hearing these common names that just keep popping up from every Wolf that we've had on the show so far, and that's going to come on in the future. We keep hearing JJ, we keep hearing Rich, Thorman's Pace, all these guys. And Pat, a great name to shout out to. I've only recently discovered him through getting your guys' draft guide, and I've been diving into all his stuff. So well written and just a really. And then I've been he has that podcast with Overzet. Those guys those two are great together. So a really good name, an up and comer that I've very much enjoyed so much. So make sure you guys check out all those names. At this point, we are going to now move into that feature segment where we're going to cross-check my top 50, some of our disagreements, so you guys can hear the takes on guys that I've either been low or high on that Evan doesn't agree with, because that's just, again, the most valuable isn't just us sitting and saying we both love Carson Wentz and his new weapons and he's going to throw for 5,000 yards. Yeah, we love him, but it's more valuable for you guys to hear, okay, this is why JuJu could actually be really good. So maybe you should ignore the Wolf when he's low on him. I love that. We're also going to just, before that, give you a little sampling of some stuff that you can find in this draft guide. And I just got to reiterate, with that $25 coupon, it's $30, but you get that coupon. So you're essentially getting $5, and it's just robbery at that point. Like, I don't get how anybody in the fantasy game doesn't just buy this with so much good analysis from some of the biggest and best
it's going to get
wolves.
you started into playing fantasy, like, seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
once you first take that first, crack hit off of FFPC, playing like a $350 league,
You never go back.
big time, fellas and ladies. Like, let's roll. Let's play fantasy seriously. Set aside a budget every year. Maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's 500, maybe it's 150. I mean, it should be more than that because the cost of the ETR in-season package is more than that. But let's start playing. This is fun. This is like a legit, really fun hobby. It distracts us from the things that suck in life, and we love to do it. Or else you wouldn't be here. You certainly wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You wouldn't be listening to the ETR podcast if you didn't love it. So
exactly.
let's take it seriously, man, and let's try to win. I mean, and let's try to get a big win. Like, you can carry that through the rest of your life. You get some big win, even if it's 5th place. Like, that's badass, in like a big tournament, like FFPC Football Guys Championship, $350 buy-in, or the big sucker, the $1,850 main event entry. I played 2 entries last year. We made the playoffs in both of them and wound up making, like, I don't know, $5,000 in profit. We did not have a big win just because our teams just, like, everyone got hurt all of a sudden. And we could barely even field a roster. The only guy that was good for us at the end of the year was Tyler Higbee. The rest of our guys were just absolute bums. But it was so fun. I mean, there's no way I would take that back, even though, we were like top 5 in overall scoring for 10 weeks, and we just petered out. But it was so fun. I would not take that back for the world. I mean, that's a true sweat.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about the industry is, yes, it's amazing to have your 12 friends since high school, that you manage those rivalries and you keep proving your superiority over them. It's a blast. I love it. And it's great to have that. But I mean, you can have life-changing money come to you, whether it's through DFS, whether it's through FPPC. Like, it's evolved in such a crazy way that you can truly, like, have a humongous day. And even as you said, like, you only cashed out at 5K. Like, that's still some great money. The rush to get there too. Like, it's evolved.
And these dudes that, I've done the league with, I have like co-owners, and I mean, like, they're like my best friends. You know what I mean? Like, right. I like made better, I mean, they're not my actual best friends, but they become like pretty good, really good friends because we did this. And, we have this text thread and we're texting all the time about it. And we have conference calls and, I mean, it's just like good for the soul, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's the other side of everything too and that's what I've loved just since getting into I mean, the fact that you're even on this podcast, like, I'm tiny compared to you, but just like reaching out to everybody, they're so welcoming. They're so willing to talk fantasy because it is such a great game. So it's an awesome community. And that's why I is beyond just loving the game and always being a guy that's been addicted to fantasy. Now that I've finally gotten involved, I've been able to talk with some of these giants that I've loved reading and just realizing how great humans you guys are it's awesome. It is such a great thing. So I'm thrilled, and anybody listening to this is obviously into fantasy, so keep diving in because it's only getting bigger. It is such a awesome industry, so keep it riding. In terms of the draft guide, I mean, there's the articles that you have out so far, all have been fantastic. As we previewed already, the team previews are amazing. I think worth the price of admission alone right there, because you just hear the takes on every relevant fantasy player. You get the sense of their talent, of their usage, but even more so the surroundings, the team and scheme around them. And Evan, you present it such a digestible way. It's unbelievable. So of all the team previews you've done, you hinted at it at the top that there are some times you've dug into a team and been like, man, I got to adjust my rankings because I didn't realize this. Is there one or two teams that really shocked you for a particular player or team?
For a full team, I would lean no. Although the Packers, actually the Broncos. Yeah, now I'm going to name like 4 teams. Broncos. Yeah, the Broncos, I went into them pretty optimistic and came out not optimistic. And I actually lowered a bunch of guys after I did the Broncos because, again, going back to that theme of trying to bet on continuity in a year like this with no practice. And again, we started off the whole podcast talking about how much we thought that practice, is important. I mean, anyone who has played competitive team sports knows that practice is important, unless you're Allen Iverson. If you're Allen Iverson, you don't need to fucking practice, okay? But most people need to practice. And we have a quarterback on the Broncos who has started 5 career games. We have a new offensive coordinator. We have a new quarterbacks coach. We have a new number 2 and 3 receivers. We have a pretty remade offensive line. And we have a second-year tight end who, I know a fan might be dope. I really could see he has a really high ceiling. He would be a guy that I would be trying to acquire in Dynasty while he's still reasonable. But we have a lot of youth, and I think that this is probably not the right year for the Broncos to come together and be successful. Although their defense is, they might be like better than expected in terms of like win-loss because their defense could be really good. And I like Vic Fangio as a head coach, but in terms of being like a truly, hitting their ceiling offensively, I think we're a year away from that. The Bears. So the Bears didn't change my mind, but going through and just looking at Allen Robinson's career and recent accomplishments in light of his just dreadful quarterback play throughout his career, both in college and the pros, because he caught almost all of his passes at Penn State from Matt McGloin and Christian Hackenberger, and he's caught almost all of his NFL passes from Mitchell Trubisky and Blake Bortles. And looking at what he's been able to do in spite of that, and how he caught 98 balls last year, which was 7th in the NFL, and was, he was 3rd in the NFL in targets. And the Bears, I think they're even worse in the pass catcher core, and Nick Foles might be the best quarterback of his career. Now, it gives me pause about Allen Robinson that there is not that established quarterback to receiver chemistry. Yeah. That does give me pause. And also that, hey, the Bears are dumb enough that they could start the season with Mitchell Trubisky, and then they just change in season and Nick Foles, and they change back to Trubisky. I mean, they're a really poorly run, from a decision-making standpoint, really poorly run organization. And that scares me a little bit about Allen Robinson. But at the end of the day, this dude caught 98 passes last year from Mitchell Trubisky, and he's in his prime. He's 27 years old. He's at peak wide receiver age. He's in a contract year. He's really freaking good. We know this. And his target competition is like I think he might lead the NFL in catches. And the more that I dug into, the positives of his outlook, and not focusing on what most people focus on. Oh, his quarterback is either going to be Trubisky or Foles, not and understanding that is true, but also understanding that there are so many other factors working in his favor. I actually moved Allen Robinson from wide receiver 14 to wide receiver 6. He became a guy that went from, if you're using our rankings to draft, you're probably not going to get him, to you're fucking getting him almost every draft now.
And you're like the 3rd or 4th guy I've had on that keeps bringing up Allen Robinson. So he's one of the ones I've gone back and reevaluated. And I can't find really too many holes in these arguments. It's his quarterbacks might suck, but they've always sucked, and he keeps getting it done. So that's one of the guys I find myself going back on and still needing to reevaluate. I bumped him up from, similar to you, I think he was 15 or so in my rankings, to 11. And now hearing you have him at 6, I might have to go back in and look again, I
mean, at the end of the day, the reason that I was okay moving him to 6 was because I just think that everyone from 6, all the receivers from 6 to 12 are almost, they're all really good picks.
Yeah.
But I think 11, your people are going to get him at 11, a decent amount. So I wanted to make sure that he was in a spot where our people are going to get him because we want him this year. We want Allen Robinson on our team this year. And, at the end of the day, like that's what people need and that's what they want, that they want to be on our guys, and Allen Robinson is going to be our guy. He was our guy last year too. We had him as the number one player to target in both redraft and dynasty and just all forms of fantasy. Just put him on, try to get him as much as you can. And he absolutely delivered, and we're doubling down.
And deservedly so. The next article I want to dive into, and I love this concept, is the sneaky stacks. And anyone listening to this outside my mom, hello, Mom, is likely aware of what stacking means. You have the quarterback and then another weapon from the same team. So you get that kind of double whammy when they score. Most often a receiver, sometimes a tight end or a running back in one of those teams that likes to target the backfield here. Well established in DFS, but now you're kind of advising people to stack in season-long formats as well. Why is that? What's the growing popularity in stacking here?
That's a great question, and there are actually, I think, a number of interesting answers. So one super high-end stack, and it might be the freaking optimal stack, is you say you're drafting at 1.11, and you start off with Tyreek Hill at 1.11. You come back and it's 2.2. It comes back to you, and you take Kelsey. You come back in the third round, and you're in a league where people are not drafting quarterbacks early, and you get Mahomes. So in DFS, let's just say in DFS, if you could have Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek on your roster every single week in DFS, I guarantee you're greening at the end of the year. Yeah, right. And you might have some monster wins.
Yeah.
And you can maybe come back with Damian Williams in the 8th or 9th round, or you're probably not getting CEH, but maybe you take Watkins in the 12th, or if you're a Hardman person, I'm not, but I get it because I love McCole Hardman. Theoretically, you could take him later. That's a team stack that has some serious freaking juice. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum would be like stacking. What's like a lower end offense that might explode? I kind of thought
that's kind of like your sneaky stacks, right? That's kind of what you're exploring there.
Yeah, but I wrote that like 2 months ago. So I'm trying to.
It was a great piece. You had 6 teams. Yeah. I liked the one I liked the most.
I did it last year, and we had like the Ravens, we had the 49ers, we had the Bucks. Just hit it out of the park, So I'm trying to do that again. But no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I liked you guys knocked the home run. I really liked, I believe the Giants were one of your teams because like you could pick your favorite, but that was my personal favorite of your 6 sneaky stacks for sure.
Actually, I think the Broncos, who were just dogged on, were like number 16 too. I might need to pull them out, but the idea of let's say we agree on the Giants, who I've sort of soured on since I wrote the article, and that has been outlined in our podcast and in some of the articles since. But let's say we're still on the Giants, or no, let's use the Lions because I still believe in them. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So the Lions as a sneaky stack, this is like almost the opposite of a team stack like the Chiefs. The Chiefs are not a sneaky team stack, although that sort of start, I think, is a little bit sneaky. Like if you could pull that off, you are – and it's realistic to pull off. It's not crazy to pull off. But let's say so the Lions are really the true definition of a sneaky stack because Stafford goes in the 11th round, and he was off to a tremendous start in his first 8 games last year. He plays indoors. This performance under this would be the second year of Darrell Bevel. They have some continuity there. Marvin Jones is back healthy. T.J. Hawkinson's back healthy. Kenny Golladay. You could come out of the 3rd round with Golladay. You could come out of the 6th round with DeAndre Swift. You get Marvin Jones in the 8th, and you get Stafford in the 11th. And, I don't know, maybe you can mix in Hawkinson too. I actually think that Hawkinson growing belief that he's a critical part of this sneaky stack. But I mean, you could, and all those guys are priced affordably. They can all smash their ADPs, really, really outscore their ADPs. And if this offense goes off and finishes like top 5 in scoring, you just bought like, you bought something at a severe discount that just appreciated in value tremendously. And then, obviously you have all your other picks that you made. And if you drafted well there, I mean, you're putting together a super team.
100%. Yeah. I forgot completely about the Lions. Probably my favorite pick now that you brought them up. Just reading from your article here, they were averaging before Stafford went down 25.5 points, 391.3 yards per game, which goes 8th and 4th in the league if that went on. In Stafford himself, 106 passer rating, yards per attempt were 9.1, yards per completion 13. That's insane. 13.4, 6.5% touchdown
he had
rate.
the highest average depth of target in the NFL. Like they were chucking it downfield. When you think back, you remember Jim Bob Cooter used to get a lot of praise. He had freaking Stafford. Like the offense was centered around with Theo Riddick and Golden Tate, a slot receiver and a running back. That was their passing game. And then Bevel comes in and is like, no. Man, we have like the strongest arm quarterback in the league. And he's going to be throwing the ball downfield to freaking Galladay and Marvin Jones and, Hawkinson sometimes. But, like Darrell Bevel just used common sense to be able to put together, what was a prolific offense for the first half of the year.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. And the part of it being sneaky is it comes at cost with all those stats, with, a top 8 to top even 5 potential offense that you're getting that cheaply. Even if you miss on Galladay because he just doesn't fall to where you're at, everybody has a shot at Marvin Jones, which his stats are right along base with.
Like Stafford, Marvin Jones, and Hawkinson would be a fine line stack. That's one thing that when you're talking about team stacking, you don't want to stack too many. When you go back and look at it, it's usually 3 or 4, maybe 5, but usually 3 or 4. 3 or 4 dudes on the same team. Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to reach on Galladay. We have Galladay actually below consensus right now. We have Marvin Jones way above consensus. We have Hawkinson right around. We have Stafford above. I can't remember where we are on Swift, but I think 3 to 4 is the sweet spot.
100%. And the Marvin Jones love is a huge one I'm totally on board with. When you look at his last 16 as compared to Kenny Galladay's, they're almost neck and neck. The guy's a touchdown machine. So that's an unbelievable stack that you can get for cheap if you miss out on something like the Chiefs. I love that call there. In the last article, before we dive into your 150, that I love, and we previewed kind of towards the top, is the importance of tiers and the tiers of Evan, which are amazing. Is there a particular tier? And again, I love how you label them too. It's one thing to like have a tier, but then for you to go out and be like, these are the RB2 picks with RB1 upside versus the next tier 4 probable lead backs, but they have some red light flags. Like, a lot of people do tiers, but you actually tell us why is this a tier together, and it's fantastic. I love to see it that way. Is there a single tier that you're looking at that's just like, damn, this is the hardest single tier to ever organize and rank? I have to keep going back to it. I don't know how this tier is going to shake out. Or do you kind of feel solid in all your tiers? You're a little muted. You're muted.
All right, yo, I got to take a break because I got to piss. But
go for it.
All this fucking Pacifico. But that is something that I would really need to think about, and why I probably should have read the show sheet before. But again, I couldn't because my life is in shambles right now. But let me go to the bathroom. And
I shall pause.
I'll sort of think of a way to answer that.
Let me know what truth comes to you while you're pissing.
All right, I'll be back in 1 second.
We are both back because neither of us have the iron bladder of Scott Hansen over here. We both had to take our pause at a bathroom break, and we're gonna. The
Scott
tiers
Hansen
question.
Not take bathroom breaks?
Never. No, I had him actually on the podcast about a month ago, and I asked him about that. literally 7 hours of commercial-free football. He never leaves. Insane.
Oh my God. That is, I mean, I hope he doesn't develop like an infection or something.
Right? An absolute savage. And he says he names his fantasy football teams the Iron Bladder because of his ability to hold it for an entire 7 hours, which is just insane.
That's fantastic.
Exactly. But we're gonna jump past the tiers question. Again, it's such a tough question, like, because all the tiers are tough to sift through. It's not like a single one is giving us headaches. We're all always trying to work through the tiers, and they're always difficult. We're going to just jump right into the top 150 cross-check, where we have some of the biggest differences. I do want to highlight the fact, and I love this about it. I don't know if you guys did this last year. I think this is a new feature where you're kind of logging your updates as you go. I mean, that's awesome to just see those value swings and whatnot as you're going. Is there a particular player you're like, this guy swung a ton most recently, or just in the entire offseason so far?
Yeah, Allen Robinson.
Yeah. And we have the why there already.
And Cam Newton. I mean, Cam Newton was in the 30s. Now he's quarterback 17. You know, I have him above Aaron Rodgers.
Love it. I mean, I have Cam above Rodgers too. That's good to know. And that's what I want to highlight as we're diving into this. It's going to seem like we disagree on a lot because I want to pull the ones that we're differing on. So again, my listeners can get that extra perspective on from a true Wolf as yourself. But man, when I was cross-checking our rankings, like there were so many of the bolder ones that me and you were in agreement on, which just kind of validated a lot of my rankings, which I felt great about. But again, this exercise is to see who we're different on, so our listeners can get those differing takes. And we'll start at quarterback. The one and it's not that I don't like this guy, but Josh Allen, quarterback 4, is pretty damn bold, especially over Kyler Murray, who everybody keeps saying is the next Mahomes, the next Lamar Jackson, who you have at quarterback 7. So what's the case for Allen, and why a little bit lower on Kyler?
I think there is a sort of built-in bias amongst the fantasy community, which very much overlaps with the data community against Josh Allen because they didn't like him coming out of college. And I mean, I didn't particularly like him coming out of college. And I am very aware of his flaws as a real-life player. But one thing that I think that he did not do at Wyoming that he has done prolifically in the NFL is run the football. And, I mean, he leads all quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns over the past few years. I mean, I think he could score 15 rushing touchdowns this year. I mean, I think that's within his range of potential outcomes. He's a bully with the ball in his hands. And that is, you know, as Rich Rebar has pointed out, as Greg Rosenthal pointed out back in the day. I remember when Greg Rosenthal a long time ago started writing about the value of quarterbacks that run the football, and Josh Allen is a prolific runner of the football. Now, he obviously has flaws as a passer, particularly as a deep passer. And that's why it was brilliant and analytically so sound of the Bills to bring in the best deep ball receiver in the league to help surround Josh Allen with players that can help elevate the play of Josh Allen from the perimeter. And we saw him take a big leap last year when the Bills went out of their way. They added like 10 offensive linemen last year. Like they just overdid their entire offensive line through both the draft and free agency. They overdid their or made over, I think is the better term, made over. They made over their receiver core with John Brown and Cole Beasley, and they drafted, they signed Tyler Croft. He didn't work out, but they drafted Dawson Knox in the 3rd round. And I think, relatively speaking, he worked out. So they have built their offense very, very analytically from the standpoint that they understand the weaknesses of the centerpiece of their offense. And they have brought in players that are capable of elevating the weaknesses of the deficiencies of Josh Allen. So I really like the way that the Bills have built. I like the fact that they're going to have a good defense and they're going to be a good field position team. I love that they're well coached in a year where I'm trying to emphasize continuity into my projections, into my analysis. They're bringing back Brian Daboll. They're bringing back John Brown. Really, all they did was they pulled out Duke Williams and Robert, Australian for Sex Foster, and Isaiah McKenzie, and inserted Stephon Diggs. And otherwise, they have like almost complete continuity on offense from the coaching staff, the offensive personnel. They're going to be good. Again, I mean, I think they're going to go like 11-5, 12-4. And you know, if you remember, like Cam Newton, who was a player, I don't think that Josh Allen is as good as Cam Newton was in his prime, but that's where they come up with this concept of Josh Allen, because Brandon Beane was in the Panthers front office, because Sean McDermott was the Panthers defensive coordinator. And so that's what they're trying to build towards. And I don't think it's going to be as successful as Cam Newton was, because, I mean, the dude has been like a top 3 fantasy quarterback like 5 times or something like that. But Josh Allen was the quarterback 6 last year, and he was the quarterback 1 his final 6 games as a rookie. He's really, really good at fantasy football. And I think that the hype train is a little bit too high on Kyler Murray and way, 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 way too low on Josh Allen.
I think all very interesting and fair points. I mean, I love the idea of them building around his weaknesses, and Stephon Diggs, surely any analytics that you have can totally justify this guy. Led in PFF's deep, passer rating when targeted. It led in yards per reception, deep touchdowns. I mean, it's not that Josh Allen can't throw deep. In fact, that was kind of his calling card. He's got a cannon arm. But can he get the guys
this
around?
is what you do with deep ball passers. I mean, you want them to be the frisbee thrower, and you want John Brown and Stephon Diggs to be the little doggies going and chasing the frisbee and going and get it. And I mean, they've made smart signings, man. I mean, John Brown and Stephon Diggs. I mean, that's dope, dude. Like, why do people not talk about that? Like, that is a dope perimeter receiver pairing. And they also use John Brown in the slot quite a bit, where he's way too fast. And I mean, I actually think that John Brown is going to lead the Bills in receiving. I think that
100%.
Yeah, that's one of my hot takes for this year, that John Brown is actually going to lead the Bills in receiving, and his ADP is like wide receiver 42 or some crap like that. I mean, he's a guy that we should be getting on all our teams.
I totally agree, man. That's actually what my next take was going to be in addition to this, was like, yeah, I love Diggs. I mean, one of the best players, but when you're now getting John Brown, who was defeating number 1 corners quite regularly last year, had a huge season, and you're going to put him probably on the secondary coverage, like, he is going to absolutely destroy that. So I love that call. You're right. I mean, picturing these guys just streaking down the field together, the dogs chasing the frisbee. TJ Hernandez, another great analyst, has been pumping out articles about why Josh Allen's the next Lamar Jackson. He put up Harmon's like reception, Matt Harmon, if anybody doesn't know him, you guys got to know him, his reception perception. And he showed just like how ridiculous of a receiving core that Josh Allen's now equipped with, especially down the field. So I get it. Yeah. I get that,
Harmon has been a long time proponent of John Brown and Stephon Diggs, and TJ Hernandez is like not even low key one of the sharpest dudes that there is.
So, I mean, you're right. There is a drumbeat there that has to be listened to. So maybe we got to start adjusting that. My one thing with Kyler Murray is I'm really hoping that year 2 of the air raid, I mean, and reading your article, they were only 22nd in plays and stuff. That's not the air raid. When you look at Kingsbury in college, it was pushing the pace. It was getting downfield aggressive. Maybe, I don't know if that was Mahomes and we're just kind of extrapolating for Kingsbury having the greatest quarterback of all time on him. But man, like in college, we didn't see that air raid quite yet. And I'm hoping that DeAndre Hopkins is that missing link, who we're going to talk about in a second, because I know you're a little bit lower on Hopkins than some other guys. But yeah, I get the Allen case, and I think I might be a little too low. I have him right around QB 8. But man, like after reading, and that was before reading Hernandez's piece, before chatting with you, I think I might be a little low. It doesn't make sense necessarily in the Scott Fish Bowl settings. If there's heavy penalties to turnovers and fumbles and things like that, that obviously impacts it. But most leagues, it's not nearly as penalized as certain leagues like that. So, yeah, I get it. The Josh Allen love is something I have to pay attention to. The other quarterback I did have a question on is Drew Brees, quarterback 18. I mean, man, this is a guy who has, never been below the top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy points per game since going to the States, other than 1 year. So, 11 out of since joining that team, it's been top 10, 13 out of 14 seasons in fantasy points per game, 92% of the time. Him and Sean Payton have obviously been just this beautiful marriage. And even last year, he missed a bunch of the season. And even still, in only 10 games, 7 of those were top 12 quarterback weeks. He was 5th in touchdowns in only 10 games, 2.7 touchdowns per game. I mean, that's a 43 touchdown pace. They signed Manny Thomas, who to me is a perfect fit for what this team does. He did all that without a clear number 2. I don't know. I'm still buying that one last great year from Drew Brees. Obviously, you're not at quarterback 18. So what has you so down on this guy?
Well, I'll tell you what, fantasy football, is supposed to be fun. And what's not fun is when your quarterback drives his team down into the red zone and they pull him off the field, or they put him at wide receiver. And another quarterback comes in and he takes the touchdown. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, that's only going to happen, I don't know, 7 times out of the year, although that's 7 bad tilts. And then, they paid Taysom Hill like good money. And they also went and got Jameis Winston. And they have one of the most talented teams in the league. They have a very, very talented defense. They have an unbelievable offensive line where they can like pound the ball down their throats whenever they want. So there are actually a lot of factors working against Drew Brees. He doesn't add value with his legs, and I think that a lot of these quarterbacks that were great for so long as pocket passers, they're being phased out a little bit. And I think that Drew Brees, to some extent, is that. I think he's going to have a good season in real life. I do not want Drew Brees on my fantasy team. I would like him a lot better if I could get Drew Brees and Taysom Hill's fantasy points together when I draft Drew Brees, but that's not an option.
Yeah, team quarterback, unfortunately, is not the play we have there. So some factors going against him. I see that, but man, I don't know, just such a historically consistent guy. And I do think Manny Thomas will bring that. Manny Sanders, rather. Manny Sanders could bring that offense back to the days where they were just unstoppable moving down the field. But we've also, you're right in the sense that we have seen Sean Payton trying to move to a run heavier thing to protect Drew Brees at age 41. There's certainly some deficiencies there. So when they won the Super Bowl, even, it was a run heavier base Saints team. And these last couple of years with Ingram and Kamara, we've seen that. So we might even see that heavier leaned into. So I get that case too. Moving on to running back. I only had one because we were just scary aligned on our running back rankings. There's really only one big difference is you're a lot higher on David Montgomery than I am, running back 21, and I'm a lot higher on Raheem Mostert than you are. And you already kind of hinted at that. So I knew that you knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. But what's your kind of case for David Montgomery? Because I'm not really seeing it after last year.
Yeah, look, I don't want to be super high on David Montgomery. I don't think that I am, actually, but I'm higher on him than you. But that might just be a good take by you. If the Bears' offensive line plays like it did in 2018 and not 2019, it was like the same offensive line, which is crazy, although they had Whitehair and James Daniels switched at center and guard, and then they switched it back during the season last year because it was such a disaster. And Kyle Long was a disaster. But if the offensive line plays a little bit better, more like 2018, then I think that he'll be a little bit more efficient. I think he's a good back. I remember distinctly, I watched a ton of David Montgomery coming out of Ohio State. I've never seen a running back get on to the second level as often as he did, but then get fucking run down from behind as often as he did, because he had no breakaway speed, and I think that showed up at the combine where he ran like 4.63 or something like that.
Yeah.
So the lack of big playability is a concern. Tariq Cohen is a concern, but Tariq Cohen was horrible last year. I mean, one of the worst offensive skill position players in all of football last year. And you would think that there would be more of an emphasis on getting the ball into David Montgomery as a pass catcher. Where you get him a little space, like not slamming him between the guards. Get him out, get him in a little bit of space. And that's where his tackle breaking ability that was so strong at Iowa State that allowed him to get onto the second level so often could come back into play. It's a little bit of wishful thinking. It's a little bit of their offense just almost can't be worse than it was last year. It's a little bit of, aside from Tariq Cohen, who again was terrible last year, he has no competition for touches. I mean, he has like incredible job security for a guy who averaged like 3.6 yards per carry, as a rookie. So it's a safe play that is not super sexy, but I think that he's going to end up getting you, 11 to 13 points a game. Some people like that. Some people don't. When I'm on the clock and I see, it's David Montgomery versus this other guy, like I'm usually taking the other guy.
Yeah.
But I have taken David Montgomery a couple of times, but it was usually like really when I first started drafting, and then I was like the running back thirst that happens in the first 4 rounds just forced me to take him like in the 6th. But no, he's not. I may end up moving him down. I'm doing a full pass through this weekend, and I'm starting to talk myself out of him here.
Yeah, the one thing I found interesting when talking to Graham Barfield about a month or two ago was the difference between tackle breaking, which he excelled at, and then yards created, one of my favorite stats. There's so many analytics, but that's what I do lean into. And Montgomery was not, despite breaking all these tackles, for the exact reason you just said, getting caught from behind, not really ripping these big plays. Yeah, he could break the tackles, but he wasn't really ever doing anything after he broke them.
Right.
At the NFL level, when you're running into these bigger, stronger guys and you're not breaking quite as many tackles, to me, he just didn't stand out as much more than your standard plotter guy that I wasn't blown away at all. And I don't love how he's used, as you said, forced up the guards. I don't know. If the offense takes a big step and he scores a lot more touchdowns, I could be dead wrong. They certainly didn't make any moves. Tariq Cohen was even worse than Leonard Fournette in terms of receiving efficiency somehow. Like out of 54 backs in the last 10 years, he was like the lowest of them all. So I get there is volume there. I like your take on Allen Robinson far more, and this offense just kind of airing it out because they just don't have a ton coming from the backfield, more than I like Montgomery. It seems like you're not even like that. You're not sitting here like, I need Montgomery. So you don't have a strong stance on him, but you do have a strong stance on, I'm not taking Raheem Mostert no matter what it seems like. Yeah. What's your take against the Mostert man that kind of lit it up at the end of last year?
I think it's a donkey pick, unfortunately. But, not that you're a donkey. I've taken myself, I've removed myself from the situation and been like, am I wrong here? Because there are smart people that like him. You like him. You're a smart dude. Sigmund Bloom likes him. And he's someone that I certainly respect. There are other smart people that I know that like Raheem Mostert. He's just, everything that he brings to the table, and I'm a huge Raheem Mostert guy. He made me thousands of dollars in preseason DFS in like 2015 or something. He was the reason that I started to love preseason DFS. I remember there was one week where, he was on the Eagles at the time, and all the other Eagles running backs were hurt. And me and Levitan were like, yo, Raheem Mostert's about to get 22 touches in this preseason game. And we put him on every single team, and he went nuts. And he had like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't know. Those stats are probably not factual, but it felt like that. No one really has that many yards and touchdowns in a preseason game, but it felt like that. It's just
true degenerate stat. I love it too, by the way. It's just like the the preseason DFS is just like
Yeah.
that next level of like fantasy addiction, which I absolutely love.
I
By
mean,
the way,
every
I had to
time, like
shout it out.
on DraftKings, like every time he would get like a catch for 7 yards, your winnings would go up by like, $600. You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, I love Raheem Mostert. We researched him. We were like, who is this scrub? And, he had been undrafted, but he was a track star at Purdue. And he was like the number 2 spark athlete running back behind, I don't know, David Johnson or something in his draft. All of this is wrong because I'm doing this off my head, but you know what I'm saying. Like, we researched him. He was athletic. He had, he was a track star. He was productive enough that we were like, it's kind of surprising that he actually didn't get drafted. And then we were like, yo, he's going to get 22 touches in this game. He got like 28 and, just absolutely ripped the cover off. And we won everything that week in preseason DFS. And I think he did it again that same preseason or something similar. So I love Raheem Mostert, but this is not I don't think this is a good fantasy situation. I think it's going to be running back by committee. I mean, all last year when Tevin Coleman was healthy, which was rare, he played ahead of Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert in 8 games as the 49ers lead back. He had an 8-game run of, as the 49ers lead back, and it was the last 5 games of the regular season and the 3 playoff games. And I think he had like 13 targets in those 8 games. And I'm never going to be on the side unless it's Derrick Henry. I mean, are we thinking that Raheem Mostert is going to be Derrick Henry? Because that's what you sort of need for him to really, really hit. I mean, I guess he could sort of pay dividends as the RB 26 or whatever, 23 or whatever his ADP is right now. But it's going to be hard with Tevin Coleman there. I think that Jeffrey Wilson showed some ability to make plays. This UDFA, JaMychal Hasty, is like the perfect Shanahan type guy to all of a sudden pop up and, be something because he's in Kyle Shanahan's scheme. I don't know what to think about Jaren McKinnon, but, he's there. He's a little bit of a threat. So he's going to have to sustain an unsustainable touchdown rate to truly be a fantasy asset because I don't think he's not going to catch many passes, and he's playing a running back by committee with Tevin Coleman, who Kyle Shanahan loves. I mean, just adores Tevin Coleman. Now, if the 49ers sign Raheem Mostert to an extension before the season, which has been talked about, apparently Raheem Mostert's agents went to the 49ers and said, hey, we want an extension, and the 49ers have said no so far. But if they do eventually say yes, that would instill some confidence. At the same time, that would instill confidence from everyone, and his ADP would probably go from last I checked, it was like 5th, 6th. It would probably all of a sudden go to 3rd, 4th, and I certainly wouldn't want it there either. So, Wolf, I completely respect your take. I respect, Sigmund Bloom's take about Raheem Mostert, and I've tried to go outside of myself to be like, hey, am I wrong here? Am I doing bad analysis here? But I've stayed convicted to my stance anti-Raheem Mostert, as much as it pains me and as much as, he has made me lots of money in the past.
And you're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of, just as many as smart guys that might be in his corner. I keep seeing the anti-Raheem Mostert drumbeat, and it starts to make me want to reevaluate it. But in the whole argument of journeyman, if he's that good, how has he not been used yet? And I get that. It's just even that preseason type of thing illuminates when he's been used. He's been pretty damn good. And
You're right. You are right. But he has never had an NFL team, and he's been in the league since, I don't know, 14 or 15, I think. And he's been with like 7 different teams. These guys get screwed, man. These guys that are UDFAs, they get screwed because no team ever commits to them. So if they have the smallest little miscue, this was the case for Charles Johnson. You remember the wide receiver, Charles Johnson? He was very, very talented. I mean, his metrics, his athletic profile was like Terrell freaking Owens. He had a minute there with the Vikings, but then he got hurt, and they were just like, boom, we don't care. We didn't invest anything in you, so we're going to let you go. And, and then he went to the, was it the AAF? And he was like by far the best player on the field. And apparently, according to reports, he was the best player on the field at, in Brown's training camp when he was there a little bit. And, he had a great run, a little like, it was a small run, but he had a really strong little run with the Vikings. And, he also had an incredible preseason with Teddy Bridgewater with the Jets. He was an NFL player, except no one ever attached anything to him. So the slightest thing went wrong, then they didn't care, Rashad Ross is another guy like that, and Raheem Mostert is kind of in that. Now, Raheem Mostert has done more actual, he's had more actual productivity. He's had it in games that really mattered, like the playoffs and the Super Bowl. But the slightest little misstep and they will cut ties. That's why the extension matters. But again, the extension is going to catapult his ADP. So it's like, I don't know, man. He's a tough one. It's honestly, it's a good, healthy debate. And it's going to be interesting to see who's right.
Exactly. And all of that makes perfect sense. Like UDFAs just don't get the chance that a lot of them probably deserve. The one thing with Mostert, and I had Grant Cohen, he's like a San Fran guy that came on, and he kept emphasizing Kyle Shanahan's ego. And when he can find a hidden gem like Mostert and then he finally performs, it almost like makes him like, I got to start feeding this guy. And he had a few quotes at the end of the season like, oh, Raheem Mostert, like, what are we doing if we don't give this guy a chance? And obviously we saw that running back 8 for those last, week 12 to 17. We saw the playoff game, the second most rushing yards in NFL history in that. So when he was finally used, he got it. I use that RotoViz splits app, which I love, to just be like, okay, if this guy gets 9 carries, how does he do? And I was blown away. It was 267 fantasy points out, season-long outlook on just games he gets 9 carries. And it's like, obviously you can't just extrapolate that and say, okay, if he gets 9 carries this year, he's going to score 267 fantasy points. But it goes to show when he has been used, he's really done it up. And, that would have been RB6 last year. So if he gets, let's say, 12, 15 with Matt Breida now gone, man, like I could totally see just an absolute blow up because I love the blocking scheme. The line is so fantastic. They've really just built that system up so well, and he fits it perfectly. The way he can, when he finds the lane, he is just gone and he is shooting out there. I get the receiving concerns, and that was something I talked about with Grant was like, but is this guy ever going to catch passes? Yeah, as you said, 13 catches or 13 targets, maybe not even catches in that span. It's like, what's going on there? And he was like, well, this guy was a receiver in high school. He's got great long speed. You saw him used, if he was used as a wheel route guy with, Emmanuel Sanders throwing to him, he was getting open downfield on jet sweeps into wheel routes. And Grant was like, I wouldn't be shocked to see a whole lot more of those type of routes from Mostert. He's not great over the middle and in the short game, but you can send this guy streaking and he has those long receiving plays. And he was predicting they're going to use him a lot more in that capacity. So yes, there's obviously the concern with the usage, the undrafted free agent profile. But if his ADP does stay in that 5-6 range, where I already had 2, maybe 3 running backs I'm confident in, and you're telling me this guy might get 12 to 15 carries in the running scheme that was second most in the league last year, Shanahan has too. I mean, there is a history where there's tons of committees, but there's also 12 seasons of calling plays. 6 of them, a guy has had 280 more touches. We saw what happened with DeVante Freeman when he was like an 8th round pick, and then just he handed the workload over to him. So if that, I don't think it's going to happen. Otherwise, Raheem Mostert would be even higher on my board. But let's say it does happen. There's just a ceiling there at a 5th, 6th round price that I just keep finding myself, especially when I have a couple surefire running backs, I keep going towards.
You seem like a very, idealistic thinker.
I always have the ceiling in mind. Like that's kind of,
that's not a bad way to just do it. That's a really good way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I still doubt the ceiling because to really have a ceiling as a running back, you need to be a guy who can get 16, 18 carries a game and catch 3 to 5 passes a game. I don't see him getting the receiving usage like that. But hey, I'll see you in the streets, bro.
I hope so. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Cheers
Wolf.
if he does, right? Exactly. Well, hopefully he does. I, again, don't think it is, but that's what's baked into his price right now. And again, as you said, if he starts rising up to round 3, we'll, of course, have to reevaluate. But right now, I'm going to take that shot because there is a humongous ceiling, in my opinion, baked into that price that I think is getting a little overlooked right now by a lot of people that I respect. And I as you and so many others have brought up, guys that I really respect. I want to reconsider it, but just the price tag is so appealing at that point. Like, if I don't have my third running back and it's round 5 and he's sitting there, I take him almost every time. In terms of wide receiver, I've hinted at this guy a lot. I bring it up my cross check, and that's JuJu, wide receiver 8 right now. You have him even over DeAndre Hopkins, one of the greats to do it over these last few years, which is pretty damn
confidently ahead of DeAndre Hopkins.
Let's hear it. What has you so confident on JuJu over DeAndre? I love it.
I mean, JuJu was like a borderline first-round pick last year. The whole argument against him is based on unfortunate injury situations and recency bias. I love betting on quarterback and pass catcher connections, established, demonstrated connections. And how many has Ben Roethlisberger even completed a pass in his career to Deontay Johnson? I'd have to go look at that. And he's completed a shit ton to JuJu Smith-Schuster, who by the age of 23 had more yards than any receiver in the history of the league, and is in his contract year at age like 22. I mean, he became legal to drink. I mean, he's I think he's a phenomenal talent who ran into I think he was a great fantasy pick. I don't think there was anything wrong with the process last year. This game is about targets, bro. This game is about targets so much. And JuJu Smith-Schuster could lead the NFL in targets. I mean, he's in the mix to as one of those guys that could I don't care about people say, "Oh, he's not that good. Oh, he was a creation of Antonio Brown," or something like that. Like, that does not matter. What matters is how many times is he going to get the ball, and he's going to get the ball a lot from Ben Roethlisberger. And that's like pretty much the end of the analysis. That's end of tweet. This dude could get 170 targets, and I want guys like that on my team.
I think my lower ranking of him is less a reflection on JuJu as it is more so. I don't know if I have faith in Big Ben. I mean, the couple pictures I've seen of this dude, he looks horrendous. He's fat. He's out of shape. His beard was like ridiculous just a few months ago.
That's the downside. Although, did you see the new pictures of him? It looks like he went and got a haircut and got a real job. And,
I love that whole tweet where he's like, "Yep, I'm back. I cut my hair and I'm back." Yeah, but it's like, ultimately,
he doesn't look like Grizzly Adams anymore.
Exactly. So I guess I instilled a little more faith, but it's ultimately like, I mean, his arm just fell off out of kind of nowhere last year. He's 38. Not to say that that's just, it could have been a complete fluke, but if that happens again, then suddenly what happens to JuJu? It's clearly last year it didn't work out for him, unlike, DeAndre Hopkins, who has made magic out of TJ Yates and friggin' nobodies his entire career outside of Brock Osweiler. It seems pretty QB proof to me. And JuJu just didn't seem like to be that level of guy. And maybe he is. And if Ben stays healthy all 16, then I am way too low on JuJu. I'm going to be looking like a complete moron because he will be in that top 12, 15. And he came out and said, I've got alcohol problems. I've been beaten off every fucking day, like whatever his quote was. Like, I don't know.
Alcohol problems, don't we all?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, we've been pounding beers this entire podcast, so like, totally. But I'm not on an NFL field chucking the ball down the field 100 times. I don't know. It's more a reflection. My lower is on my lack of faith right now in Big Ben coming back and actually sustaining what he used to be. If he does, I'm going to be dead wrong. But to me, I'm going to bet on a talent like Hopkins that has just got it done with jack shit in his career and now gets the Kyler Murray that I guess you're a little lower on in the industry, but a lot of people are just like, this is the next guy to rise up. But you keep talking about that continuity of the offseason, and that could be a big factor is building that rapport, not having that already established. Is that kind of what has you a little bit lower on DeAndre, is not being in this offense and now this whole weird offseason? Or what's your take there?
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, he's got to learn a new offense in an off-seasonless year. He's got to learn how to, I mean, I just think the situation is very similar to what happened in Cleveland last year, where everybody was anticipating this leap from Baker Mayfield. I think warrantedly, I was expecting a leap from Baker Mayfield, and I screwed up on Odell Beckham. I had him as I think the number 3 overall receiver. And I think DeAndre Hopkins right now is the wide receiver 3 in FFPC ADP, or wide receiver 4. I think he just did get recently passed, and now he's the wide receiver 4. But I think that DeAndre Hopkins is to Odell Beckham as Christian Kirk is to Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry had a hell of a year. No one talks about how great of a year Jarvis Landry had last season. And Kyler Murray has that established connection with Christian Kirk. I know Christian Kirk sort of fell below breakout expectations last year, but I mean, he got banged up a little bit, and he had 4 more catches in 10 of his 13 games. So Kyler was looking for him. And I think that, I think that the answer is to fade DeAndre Hopkins, certainly at his ADP, and we have him way low, but below his ADP. I mean, if he's wide receiver 4, right, we have him at wide receiver 10, I think, or maybe even lower than that. And then you buy Christian Kirk, who I think is this year's Jarvis Landry. They even play similar positions. Like Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are going to be the slot receivers in the Cardinals' 4 receiver sets, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to be outside. DeAndre Hopkins lived as a back shoulder and contested catch receiver. When have we seen Kyler Murray really, kick it with a back shoulder contested catch receiver? I wouldn't say CeeDee Lamb was that. CeeDee Lamb was a guy who dominated after the catch and in the slot. And then who was the other guy? Marquise Brown was a deep threat. So, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the number 1 guy. I do a shy away 40 every year, 40 guys to fade. Just don't, just draft around them. Let other people take them. And DeAndre Hopkins might be the number 1 guy. I mean, I think he's a horrible pick at wide receiver 4.
And as much as I want to go to bat for him right here, I often am finding myself taking a running back or another receiver over him anyways. But I am just hoping, that in an offense that targeted the wide receivers almost 70% of the time, they get this alpha that could just, behind only Tyreek and deep touchdowns.
Well, and they're also a very run-friendly team. They didn't pass. They were 22nd. Maybe they'll jump up to 14th in offensive plays. They're an elite running team, though. I mean, they're going to run the piss out of the ball because they're really, really good at it. They spread their offensive linemen out, so they create inherent gaps. And Kenyon Drake just explodes through those gaps. Kyler will run it. I mean, they're not going to lead the NFL in pass attempts. I mean, they're going to be balanced, I think, largely from a run pass ratio. And DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a decoy a lot on the outside in that offense.
And I will admit too, after reading your team preview on the Cardinals, I already was high on Drake. I had him above DeAndre Hopkins. I had him as a fringe first rounder. I think I moved him up to 8 or 7 even on my big board. I already loved him, and then I saw those type of stats that kind of justified what I was seeing even more so. So I love that Arizona Cardinals team preview. That was a fantastic one. The only other wide receiver I had a question on was DeVante Parker. I mean, this guy blew up last year, number 2 wide receiver after week 7, once Fitzmagic kind of took over, only behind Michael Thomas. And you see Chan Gailey, who's got this history. He comes in, he's got a history of peppering his top guys, 157, 141, 134, 148, 173, and then 128 over his last 5 years of coordinating for the number 1 receiver there. If we can peg DeVante Parker for those style of targets again after, last year we saw that bevy, we saw that consistency, I don't see why he wouldn't at least be top 15, but you have him down at, wide receiver 30. So you're not buying it. And I get the hesitancy after he took 4 or 5, whatever it is, seemingly forever to break out. I don't know if that's the concern, and you're just like, maybe that was the 1 year fluke and I don't want to buy a 1 year wonder, but you're definitely lower on him than I am. So is there a case against DeVante Parker that my listeners got to hear?
Yeah, I mean, the case against DeVante Parker is really strong. It's that he averaged 50 yards per game before Preston Williams went down and over 100 yards per game after Preston Williams went down. I've always believed in his talent. I've always been a fan of his talent, but he's a recency bias guy. He's like, the same people that like him like Raheem Mostert. You know what I mean? Like, and that's fine. Sometimes those guys hit. DeVante Parker's still a very young player. I mean, the Ryan Fitzpatrick aspect of this, like, Tua is going to play at some point probably. Preston Williams is back. Preston Williams was starting to look as like the number 1 receiver in the previous games prior to him going down. It looked like he was starting to overtake DeVante Parker. I'm avoiding the Dolphins offense in general. I'm below consensus on Gesicki. I don't know why people are talking themselves into this offense. To be perfectly frank, I don't get it at all. I mean, it's not going to be a very good offense. Preston Williams is back to take usage. The running back situation is people are trying to talk themselves into Breida and Jordan Howard. Like, I mean, maybe in 2021, I think we could see this offense take a step forward with Tua and DeVante Parker and Preston Williams and Gesicki. But I don't think that that's going to be. And this is another team that is changing offensive coordinators during an off-seasonless year. I mean, it's just no thank you. No thank you.
And it is interesting that's going to come into such a weird play as these new offensive coordinators. I just did a show with Pete Davidson all about these new offenses, and who knows if we're going to see any of them get to the levels that we hope a lot of them will because of this weird continuity. Yeah, you can try to teach it over Zoom.
I mean, I feel like I'm making it a really big part of my analysis this year and my projections this year, and other people aren't, because when I listen to other podcasts, like, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about the offseason this year. Maybe it's too hard to, integrate. But I mean, I can't even imagine it not being a very big thing.
It has to be, and it's a tough pill to swallow, especially for rookie. I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I love the landing spot. I want to take him in round 2 and have him be the next Brian Westbrook. So it's so hard for me to be like, well, it might be a 6, 7, 8 week learning gap, and if you have to eat that, there's a decent chance for your second rounder that you might not be in contention when he does start to blow up. Or, Jonathan Taylor, same thing. I love the line and I love the fit, but man, if he doesn't get himself acclimated, and hopefully running back, it's an easier transition anyways, that it might not be. But yeah, it's got to be weighed in. And I agree with you. I don't think anybody's really – I think we're all kind of trying to be blissfully ignorant because it's such a tough time to just live life in general. So we all just want to be like, football, it's all perfect, it's all good. And it's not really right now, which is – I think you're smart to factor that in a lot more.
I hope so, because I write about it in like every article that I write. So, and I don't see anybody talking about it very much. So, I mean, some people will add it, like use it as like a little addendum, at the end. But I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
The last guy I have, we're going to tight end now just to try to hit every single position, is Austin Hooper. You got him at tight end 8, which I think is just a little too high. I get how great he was last year. Tight end 1.
Everyone thinks it's too high. Everyone thinks it's too high.
And so what's your case then for why you have him so high? Because I don't buy it right now.
He's going to be a really big part of their offense. He's a floor play, though. So he doesn't meet your criteria. And I completely respect your sort of almost upside, track upside. I dig that. I dig that. But at the tight end position, I think he's about as solid as you can get in that sort of tier that he's in. I think he's going to be right around like 60, like 706 or 7. And, that's he's going to be on the field like all the time. And that's about it. I mean, the tight end position, I think it's really actually deeper than it ever has been that I can remember even being a fantasy analyst. But there's no one really that has like a 55 to 65 catch floor outside of the absolute studs up top. I mean, Blake Jarwin, like I love Blake Jarwin, but I mean, he could catch 37 passes. I mean, Austin Hooper is going to catch 55. And so he's going to be like usable. But I think it's very, very, very fair to question his ceiling. First of all, his game isn't really suitable to a big ceiling unless he's in some crazy situation like he was last year in Atlanta where they led the NFL in pass attempts and just throwing the cover off the ball, I don't know. I've thought about moving him down. I honestly have, but I can't bring myself to bring him below Tyler Higbee, who is right behind him. And Tyler Higbee, I know that the world is on fire for Tyler Higbee. And trust me, again, as someone who had him on both of my FFPC main event teams, $1,850 buy-in last year, I get it. But Gerald Everett, before he got hurt, he out-targeted Tyler Higbee 56-27 on the season before those final 5 games. So Tyler Higbee is about as boom-bust, dicey as you can possibly get. The Rams love Josh Reynolds. One of the reasons that they cited in their post-draft press conference why they traded away Brandon Cooks. Austin Hooper is just he's buying. What would be a good comment? He'd be like American Pie, and then Tyler Higbee would be like, some old chocolate cake that you've had in the freezer for like 3 months. It could be awesome, but it could like poison you.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it's comparing him to sweets. A great analogy. I love just like comparing fantasy players to random shit like that to like try to ground the comparisons. That's fantastic. I mean, my biggest worry is how big is this pie going to be? How many mouths? There's Odell. There's Jarvis Landry, who works that same kind of area of the field, as you said, had such a great season last year, and I love Landry. So it's just like, is there going to be enough room for Hig? And you said it's a floor play. So I guess, that's kind of the argument. And me, a notorious ceiling chaser, I want the guy that could win me my league. And it's not going to be Hooper. He's certainly not going to be a league winner. And when you have such an intriguing tight end pool this year, deeper than it's ever been, if I kind of cut that, like, oh my God, this guy could be number 1 tight end at like, Evan Ingram, if he ever stayed healthy. If I'm not taking him, then I'm kind of just waiting on Jonnu Smith or Eric Ebron, like
I'm not taking Jonnu Smith, but I'll definitely take Ebron.
Yeah.
I'll take Jarwin. I'll even take a little bit of Sternberger.
Some Jack Doyle.
I take Gerald Everett in like every draft. He's the Rams starting tight end. I mean,
yeah.
Aside from the last 5 games of last season when he was hurt. But no, I completely agree with you. Actually, Austin Hooper goes so late in drafts that, I mean, I don't draft him where I have him ranked. I did a recent draft where I took Austin Hooper, Ian Thomas, and Jack Doyle as my 3 tight ends in a best ball. And I was like, and I got him like around 11, 13, and 15. And I was like, I love this tight end stable. This is going to be great. So I'm completely with you. At the same time, I love drafting George Kittle. I actually boosted him up way up in our rankings recently because I wanted to make sure, just in the top 150, I didn't move him above Kelsey, but I've been a little tempted to at times. And I just wanted to move him in a spot in the top 150 where we made sure that our audience, our readers, were going to at least have a chance at him, because I think he can have an absolute special season, which is kind of enhanced by the Deebo Samuel situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I was citing that Grant Cohen interview, and he came on and said if he does go on the PUP, if Debo Samuel's out for those games, like the target share that Kittle is going to inherit would be insane. I mean, he was like 14, 15 targets a game.
Dude, can you imagine?
I,
Jimmy Garoppolo, well, and look at their early season schedule too. Jimmy Garoppolo to George Kittle in DFS ought to be